Okay, today, part 9. Who are the Phoenicians really? The Greeks called them Phoenicians, but historians and scholars do not know what they called themselves up to now. Known as courageous seagoers and settlers around the entire Mediterranean basin, some scholars undoubtedly claim their reach was even farther. Who were they? Not only were their territorial accomplishments hugely impressive, but their legacy includes being known as the inventors of the phonetic alphabet, which became the key driver of all Western cultural development. Dr. Nissim R. Gaynor from Israel, in his landmark book, Who Were the Phoenicians, of which an article was published in the popular Israeli Haaretz News, gives us remarkable insight who these people are. The Phoenicians' geography. It is universally accepted today that the Phoenicians were a nation that had settled on the Mediterranean coast, along a narrow strip of land bordered by Aradus to the north, Mount Lebanon to the east, and Mount Carmel to the south, which is at the Yezreel Valley in Israel. The city of Jaffa is sometimes mentioned as the southern border, and Euryterus River, Nahar el Kabir, as the northern one. Pliny mentions Jaffa in Israel, at Tel Aviv as Jaffa, the Phoenician, though he designated the city of Dor as the border between Phoenicia and Judea. Raymond Weil, relying on various sources, infers that the term Phoenicia implied at first a vast section of the Aegeo ancient Greek area and Asiatic Asia world, and that only in the course of centuries it became restricted to the above mentioned narrow coastal strip during King Solomon's reign. For while this puzzling fact remains mysterious, the theory is that King Solomon took reign of this vast empire due to his absolute wealth, which makes perfectly sense. According to Herodotus, these Phoenicians dwell in old time, as they themselves say, by the Red Sea. This quotation from Herodotus was taken by many scholars to mean they came from the region surrounding the Persian Gulf, while others thought they were from the Erythraean region, Red Sea area. Another another school of thought, which is more accepted, is that they ventured to these areas and also many others. Remarkably, hold on a minute. Remarkably, two Phoenician type of columns of stone have been found at the place of the Israelite crossing at the arm of the Red Sea called the Gulf of Aqaba. A pillar, one on each side of the Gulf. The granite column found on the Saudi coastline opposite is identical to the one on the Egyptian side, except This one's inscription was still intact. In Phoenician letter, in archaic Hebrew, it contained the word Mizraim, Egypt, Solomon, Edom, Des, Pharaoh, Moses, and Hashem's name. This indicates that King Solomon had set up this column as a memorial to the miracle of the crossing of the sea. These Phoenicians indeed ventured there, but it cannot be said with certainty that they originated from there. Strabo refers with astonishment to the claim of the inhabitants of the Persian Gulf that two cities in their region are named Tyros and Aradus, whereas Pliny states that the name is not Tyros but Tyros. Political and geographical relations. With respect to political and geographical relations, Phoenicia held a foremost position in the history of the ancient world. They were known as brave and courageous merchants and seafarers. They were the first to venture great distances from shore and to navigate the open seas aided by the North Star as guide. In their travels, they gained the Atlantic Ocean and were the first to reach the British Isles. Herodotus states that Phoenician seafarers were the first to circumnavigate the African continent. Through their constant traveling, the Phoenicians expanded their commercial ties with many countries and served as a link between the East and the West. Another result of their travelers was the founding of many settlements, especially in the Mediterranean basin. The army of one of these, Carthage, nearly vanquished Rome. Carthage, called Hadast, New City, was the Phoenician city-state of Carthage, and during the 7th to 3rd century BCE included its sphere of influence the Carthaginian Empire. The empire extended over much of the coast of North Africa as well as encompassing substantial parts of coastal Iberia, Spain, and the island of the western Mediterranean Sea. Carthage was founded in 814 BCE. The dependency of the Phoenician state of Tyre at that time. The Carthage gained independence around 650 BCE, shortly after the dispersion of the northern 10 tribes, and established its political hegemony over the Phoenician settlement throughout the western Mediterranean. This lasting until the end of the 3rd century BCE. At the height of the city's prominence, it served as a major hub of trade, with trading stations extending throughout the region. This was the exact time that the Scythians dominated the trade route from the north of the Black Sea to Greece, where Dan settled, and some passed through India and down to Egypt, including the entire Middle East. The Scythians had exceptionally good ties with the Greek settlers and supplied massive amount of grain to them, even allowing these Greeks to build port cities around the Black Sea. The Phoenicians had an enormous influence on the ancient world, particularly upon the Greeks. in architecture, religion, languages, and other spheres. The Pliny ascribes to the Phoenicians the invention of the glass industry. Whether this settlement is accurate or not, there is no doubt that they raised the art of glass making to a high degree of perfection. He also ascribes to them the invention of astronomy, navigation, and military strategy. This astronomy and navigation aspects are also clearly seen in the layout and construction in the megalithic monument on the migrating paths of the Danite and the later following 10 tribes Israelite, who led them as navigating road markers. From the Phoenicians, the Greeks also received their system of weight and measures. However, the most important invention attributed to them is that of phonetic writing, which was and still is the main basis and cause for the development and advancement of the human race. Appearance of the Phoenician name. It is important to note that the term Phoenicians only appears in later centuries. First and foremost, in early Greek literature, Homer, the ancient Greek poet, 1000 BCE, is the earliest source mentioning Phoenicians, Phoenike, from Tyre and Sidon, and terrain of Sidon, which is in Phoenicia. Nevertheless, in epigraphic inscriptions from that part of the world where Phoenicia is supposed to have existed, no such name appears. The Bible refers to the inhabitants of this area as Tyrians and Sidonians, whereas in the Amarna letters we read of Sidon or Canaan, although the latter is used to denote the general term for the whole area. All are linked to a place name and not people, in the same way as we would say to a people coming from Cape Town in South Africa are called Capetonians, but in reality they are South African people. In Egyptian inscription, the names Karu or Retenu are employed to designate the region of Phoenicia and Israel. It should be noted that in certain Egyptian texts from the 3rd millennium BCE, the name Pinhur appears, which is similar to the Greek Phoenikes, and is identified with the Phoenicians. It should be emphasized that in ancient Greek literature, including Homer, despite the use of the term Phoenicians, the term Sidonians is more generally employed. The interpretation of Phoenicia as identical with Canaan appears only in later period. Stephen of Byzantium and Sanconiaton to be blindly followed accordingly by the church fathers who identified Canaan with Phoenicia. Hecateus tells us that Phoenicia was formerly called China, Canaan. However, Philo-Biblius mentioned in his mythology China, who was afterward called Phoenix. This informs us that the name Canaan was changed to Phoenicia. Yet today it is customary to see the terms Phoenicians, Sidonians, and Canaanites as a single identity and therefore interchangeable, which has produced the tendency to designate as Phoenicians the inhabitants of the region even in periods prior to the appearance of this name in history. To cite W.F. Albright, the word Canaanite is geographically, and culturally synonymous with Phoenicia. Who, therefore, were these people who settled in the region of Tyre and Sidon? The Bible classifies the inhabitants of the entire planet into three ethnic groups: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The division which is still in use with the modification that instead of the Japheth group we speak of the Indo-European group. Since the Bible associates the Sidonians with Canaan, the son of Ham, they are still linked nowadays with the Canaanite race. However, the linguistic and cultural characteristics of the nation that inhabited the region of Sidon, as revealed by archaeological findings, are those of a Semitic people. This evidence induced scholars to accept the biblical division only in part, namely, that the Phoenicians were Canaanite by race, yet were not of Hamitic, but rather of Semitic origin. This paradoxical explanation is the general belief today. In support, the analogy is made with today's Afro-American descendant, with their English language culture. Okay. Interestingly, C. Autoran claims their origin to have been entirely different, calling them Aegeoasiatics. Perot, while trying to classify the Phoenicians' state, relying upon the genealogical table in the 10th chapter of Genesis, some have supposed them to belong to the stem of Cush, so they will be cousins of the Egyptians, like the Canaanite, who according to the same genealogy were also sons of Ham. But on the other hand, since the Phoenician inscriptions have been deciphered, it has been recognized that the Phoenician and Hebrew languages resembled each other very narrowly, so narrowly that they might almost be called two dialects of one tongue. In this be so, ought we not rather to connect the Phoenicians with the great Semitic race, of which the Hebrew are the most illustrious representation? We cannot say how close the relationship may have been, but in any case, the Phoenicians must have been much more nearly connected with the Hebrews than with the Egyptians and other nations whom we know as Cushite and Hamite. The principal object of this research is to try, in the light of sources known to us, to trace the course of events in the area of Sidon, only much later to be known as Phoenicia, from the remotest period in time, and by so doing to provide an answer to the question, who are the people that dwell in the region? In other words, who were the people whom the Greeks called Phoenicians? The sources from which historical investigators derived their knowledge of Phoenician history can roughly be divided into two. Number one, epigraphic, and number two, archaeological. In Dr. Gaynor's book, Who Were the Phoenicians?, he discusses the epigraphic sources and then goes on to examine how far the archaeological findings are in conformity with the conclusions deriving from these sources. It is worthwhile to note that until the discovery of the Tel El Amarna and the last Shamla tablet, scholars' main sources for the knowledge about the Phoenicians were only the Latin and Greek literatures, but these cannot be considered a primary source, since they originated in much later periods. Homer c. 1000 BCE, Herodotus between c. 480 to 425 BCE, Strabo 50 BCE, Josephus and Diodorus Siculus in the first decade CE, etc. It is very important to note that the most ancient epigraphic sources in our possession today are the Ras Shamla tablet, El Amarna tablet, and the Bible. Of all these sources, only the last two refer to political event. Therefore, Dr. Gaynor extracted outstanding information from these two sources about the region of Sidon. Because of the crucial importance of the findings of the Jewish scholar, Dr. Gaynor has conclusion to give here in full. He said, there can be observed a close identity between the so-called Phoenicians and the Israelites in all spheres of life and culture, such as language with all its ramifications, religious and social structures. Sanhedrin, Supreme Religion Council, the rule of judges, also in Samodi, mythology, cosmogony, burial rite, tomb swarms, tariffs and names of sacrifices, art, monetary system, names of the months, system of weight, etc. Along with all this, there existed a parallel identity in historical event. The Israelites conquered the land about the 14th century BCE, the Amarna period. There occurred at that time a period of political and cultural changes among the Canaanite population, and there were also changes in writings. The rule of judges is substituted for the rule of kings. Moreover, names like Lib Adi Hadad changed to Lib Baal, indicating substitution of deities, Hadad to Baal, etc. And also we note the first appearance of the name Phoenicians, the pinnacle of expansion for the Phoenician Empire overlaps in time with the Israelite expansion of King Solomon's period. Okay, I'm going to stop right here for now.